my life is not solely about me and my family, but it's about society as a whole and the contribution that I can make. Radical change is to flip everything on its head. Everything that we've known, everything that we've believed to be true, really question it. And that for me excites me beyond
Yeah.
measure. The biggest gap in society isn't skill, it's self awareness. I am born into this age for a specific purpose. It's a beautiful, chaotic time to be alive.
Hi, and welcome back to Metaconscious Leaders, where we explore the idea that enlightened leadership begins not with action, but with awareness. An awareness of our shared humanity, our interconnectedness and interdependence with the living natural world, and more widely with the cosmos. There are some leaders who work within systems, and there are others who stand at the very edge of them, where the consequences of how we live, lead, and see each other becomes impossible to ignore. My guest today, Duro Oye, lives and works at that edge. Duro is a CEO and founder of the multi-award winning charity 20 Levels. Since its inception in 2013, the organization has directly empowered over 4,000 young people and reached a wider community of more than 22,000. Focused on supporting individuals from racially underrepresented and lower socioeconomic backgrounds, 2020 Levels helps young people unlock their potential and build pathways into careers and entrepreneurship through a range of transformative programs. Through his work with 2020 Levels, Duro is not only supporting young people, he's engaging with identity, helping individuals reimagine who they are, what they're capable of, and what kind of future they can step into. And in so doing, he holds up a mirror to all of us, to the systems that we built, the stories we normalized, and the deeper question beneath everything, which is, what does it truly mean to lead? So Duro, it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us on Metaconscious Leaders. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here.
Duro, can we begin with you? Take us back to your early life and what then was shaping the path that you are now walking.
I mean, it's interesting how far back we should go when it comes to my early life. I think for me, growing up, I think back to the early stages, council estate background, single income household, not very much inspired by the things that happen within the four walls of our council flat, but was looking out the council flat window and seeing life, albeit life. It wasn't real life, it was council estate life. So it was limited in terms of what you could see, what you could be, what you could become, all of those kind of things. But because of the
Right.
lack of inspiration within the four walls of my house, that was what inspired me. So I got involved. I did things that came along with that kind of environment. But thankfully, I didn't stay there for too long because being the ambitious, driven individual that I am, I wanted more. And the more exposed I got, the more I realized that there was more to life than what was happening on my council estate. Then there was more to life than what was happening in my local borough. There was more to life than what was happening in London. And it just continued to grow and grow and grow from there
Right.
to the point that I am now, where I see life from a completely different perspective. My life is not solely about me and my family, but it's about society as a whole and the contribution that I can make to ensure that I leave this world far better than how I met it.
Wonderful. Was there a moment or a series of moments, Duro, that you can recall which kind of shifted you into that awareness, that sort of realization?
Yeah, absolutely. University. So at the age of 18, 19, moved out for the very first time. I was independent, lived on my own. And I started to just see things differently. In your introduction, you talked about identity. I think it was during that time in my life that I started to explore what identity meant to me, looking beyond the labels that I was given, but really looking inward to find out who I am, what makes me tick, what are the things that excite me and motivate me. And because I was at university, I lived a very different life at university. Unlike some of my peers, I lived on my own. I had a 4-bedroom house in the first year. And, I had a lot of time to kind of do that deep work and think and reflect and
Okay.
think about what I wanted to do with my life. And when I finished university is when I embarked on this journey of, self-discovery. My faith played a huge part in it. It's when I started taking my faith seriously at the age of 20, 21. And yeah, it's just helped mold me into the man that I am today.
Tell us a little bit about your faith.
I'm a Christian. And so
Okay.
born again Christian. Yeah, always have been. I grew up a Christian. Parents were
Right.
Christians, but you know, when you're young, they force you to go to church, and you don't really understand it. You just do it because you have to. But
Yeah.
then, you know, the older you come of age, and you then start realizing that you wanted to build your own relationship with Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, and that's what I did. And you know, there
Yeah.
are lots of principles and morals in the Bible that I live by, and it's just
Yeah.
helped shape my worldview in terms of how to help build a better society for all.
Yeah. And you mentioned there the question, "Who am I?"
Mm.
Part of your exploration. What answers do you come up with when you ask that question?
For me, what comes up is I'm a man who is deeply passionate about living life to the full. Living life to the full doesn't necessarily have to do with just me, but
Yeah.
it's all encompassing, inclusive of those around me and
Yeah.
those within my sphere of influence. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I would see it. And then it
Yeah.
then can go deeper into the things that I'm passionate about, things and the people that I love, the things that motivate me and just keep me fulfilled. And that feeds quite nicely into my work.
Yeah. So from those early experiences, you find yourself now working right at the front line of society, Duro.
Hmm.
But before we follow on that line of thought, can we talk briefly about context,
Hmm.
which I think is everything to do with meaning. And the context, of course, that I'm talking about here is this time for humanity.
Hmm.
Guests that I've had on Metaconscious Leaders variously describe it as a catastrophe, a metacrisis, a metamorphosis, or rather, and an awakening, and a
Mm.
giant shift in consciousness itself. How do you frame in contextual terms? How do you frame where humanity is at this time?
Would say we're in a flux at the moment, and it's a time where decision needs to be made. We can no longer, as a society, remain on the fence. You know, we all have
Mm,
to lean into what we believe in, and it's very difficult for you to remain silent when you are constantly faced with injustice, left, right, and center. Like
yeah,
you have to take a stand on something. You know, there is that saying, you know, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. You know,
yeah,
and I believe we're at that stage within society now where everybody needs to stand for what they believe in. And what we're seeing, the outplay of that is when people are standing for what they believe in, we start to realize that a lot of us are not on the same page. You know, a
yeah,
lot of us are friends, a lot of us are family, but our views are not the same. You
yeah.
know, for the very first time, it's starting to cause conflict because what I've always known to be true about a friend or a family member is now proving the complete opposite. And a lot
No,
of us are not sure what to do with that.
Dura, is that because on the one hand we're all individual, we have individual minds, as it were. We're always going to have different perceptions, and that's diversity. And but so is there a problem there with our divergent thinking, or is it that we have forgotten how to accept and interact and embrace diversity?
It's
That
yeah,
those kind of different points of view, because
it's the latter.
right,
Diversity is a beautiful thing, and when done right, when
yeah,
expressed right, when received right, it can be absolutely wonderful.
yeah,
But when it's the opposite, it's where we then start to realize actually that there are kinks here. When
yeah,
people play into a narrative that they don't necessarily believe in, but they think it's the right thing because everybody else is doing it, so they feed into it. But then it's
yeah,
not really deep down what they believe. It's not at their core what they believe. And that's where we then start getting these head butting, where it's like
yeah.
people are disagreeing, whereas we can agree to disagree and we can find ways to work together if we embrace each other's uniqueness and
Yeah.
appreciate what each of us can kind of bring to the table.
It kind of strikes me. I always have a picture in my head that if we can find distractions or other places to go where we can avoid uncomfortable
Conversation.
aspects of life, conversations, yeah, then we go there. But we're now reaching a point where there is nowhere else to go,
No. This is it.
and
This is it. You have
we're
to
having
face
to
up.
confront this.
Yeah. You have to face up to it.
Yeah. And it's happening in a lot of different at a lot of different levels, in a lot of different areas, on a lot of different topics, kind of simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I need to get back into my history. I don't know whether you've ever had a time in history where it's been like this before. It's something that's actually been on my mind of late, to really kind of look back at what can we learn from our history books, right? What can we learn from what society was back then? What were some of the mistakes that they made? What were some of the successes that they had?
Yeah.
And, like they say, history always repeats itself. What can we
Yeah.
learn from history at this moment in time? So can we go back
Yeah.
to go forward? Because another thing that I do in my work with building the next generation is how can we ensure we don't make the same mistakes that our predecessors did? And how can we shape a new society and what we're doing today to ensure that that happens? Because that won't
Yeah.
happen by accident. So I'm always I always have the notion of, okay, all of this is going on right now, but has this happened before? What can we learn
Yeah.
from pockets of history that might be similar to what we're experiencing now? And if it's never happened before, then yeah, this is very, very interesting times.
Yeah, well, I don't think it has happened like this before,
Yeah.
for multiple reasons, not least the number of people on the planet, um, internet, etc. Those
Mm,
kinds of
mm,
things are very significant, aren't they? Um,
absolutely.
and one of the things is when we talk about context and some of the words that I've just been mentioning there, it can feel like things are breaking down and so forth. But I'm curious whether you also see this as an invitation for radical change, a moment, actually an opportunity for humanity to develop, to go to another level, that it's ripe for a rapid evolution. What does radical change look like for you, Duro?
Another good question. Radical change is right now in this current context, it'll be to flip everything on its head. Everything that we've known, everything that we've believed to be true, really question it. In working with the next generation, that's one of the things that I really love about them. They question everything. And then they expose ignorance because
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that are of the older generation that have just done things in the same way because that's the way it's always been done, right? The next
yeah,
generation, they'll ask you that question, but why? But
yeah,
why? But why? And most times, the older generation just try and shoot them off and like, so asking me these questions, mainly because
yeah,
they don't have the answers and they haven't really done the work to really find out why. The
yeah,
thing with the new generation is they want to understand why so that they can explore if there is a different way of doing it. So radical change is, for me in this context, ripping up the playbook and creating a new one, structured way, not in a destructive, divisive way of just let's burn down the whole system and start again. But let's go into this quite measured, knowing that we want to get to the crux of it, get into the center of it to really understand the why. But then on the flip side, explore what can be done differently. Now,
yeah,
one of my biggest issues right now is the education system. It's
mm,
archaic and it's no longer fit for purpose, right? But
yeah,
yet people don't want to accept it. Whether we
yeah,
like it or not, we have to make changes to the education system.
yeah,
And it's not going to work just skirting around the edges and changing this here and changing that there and changing that there. We need a complete overhaul.
yeah,
Employers are telling us that young people are coming out of education not fit for the workplace. So what it
yeah,
was really designed for in the first place is not even doing that. Whereas that I
yeah,
see education as it should be a playground where you're able to explore different things to build a solid foundation. And from that foundation, you're able to discover that these are the things that I'm skilled at. This is my way of learning. This is the way that I can approach a situation or a challenge and come up with a solution. And once you've done all the various different layers of education, you get to the end and you realize that this is essentially my purpose. I've discovered my purpose of why I'm here on earth, and now I'm going to go and pursue it. Imagine if we looked at education that way where
yeah,
young people, with all of their ideas, all of their imagination, not being dampened, not being boxed in, not being told that this is the way you have to be, this is the way you have to learn, this is the way you have to express yourself.
yeah,
That we can go down a whole conversation on this whole topic of radical change, but just that one thread of education alone. Imagine if we just followed that thread through. What could
yeah.
life look like in the next 25 years if we really overhauled the education system?
Yeah. What do you think it would take to do that? Because
Take
there is
guts.
there is
It
so
will
much
take
invested in it, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah. It will
By
take
so
guts.
many.
It will take a group of individuals that genuinely believe that it requires an overhaul. It will take a lot of money and it will take time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm currently working with a group of people that are looking to explore this. And that for me excites me beyond
Yeah.
measure. You know,
Yeah.
I look at, I've got a 5-year-old son, you know, and I look at the education system that he's in. Thankfully, his education system works for him. And that's also another reason where I'm like, we're blessed. We're in a really blessed and privileged position to be able to provide for him an education system that works for him, that meets him where he's at. But how many billions of kids don't
Yeah.
have that?
Yeah.
And how are we as a society doing them a disservice by not offering them that?
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think I notice not allowing alternative models to rise up. So, I mean, if you have a system, it's very difficult to change that system because everybody's on that boat. But
Yeah.
if you allow other options, alternatives to grow up alongside, then you'll have people moving over, making different choices, and
Hmm.
things will naturally evolve. But that doesn't happen because for a whole bunch of reasons like vested interests and so forth.
Yeah.
Homeschooling is one that in certain parts of the country certain parts of the world is a lot more popular and a lot more accepted
Hmm.
and acceptable within their societies than it is here in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. The systems here in the UK are really structured and centered around a set way of doing things, a set way of performing, because that's the way it's always been done. Like I
Yeah,
mentioned earlier, it's going to require time. So we need studies on those that have been homeschooled. We need studies on some of the success stories of homeschooling. We need studies on um, different forms of education.
yeah,
These things are not new, right? They've been happening for years, but no one's
correct.
taken the time to study them and to be
Yeah,
able to showcase that this
yeah,
is what success could look like, and this is what it's looked like in the past. What could
yeah,
it look like in the context of the UK education system? No
yeah,
one's really done that work, and it, like I said, it requires time, it requires money, and it requires guts, and people that are
yeah.
willing to go against the grain. Thankfully, I believe those individuals are now rising up to the challenge, and I for one, will put my hand up to be counted amongst that group.
I would agree with you. Most certainly, Euro. So education, other defining challenges that we
Mm.
have within society, within this age?
Yeah, I'd say low expectation culture that's usually placed on young people from underrepresented backgrounds.
Okay.
So when we talk about the work that we do and we talk about the young people that we support, in some circles you can see a face change or a demeanor change because they once they hear underrepresented, they have a picture in their mind of what that looks like,
Yeah.
right? And the beauty of the work that we do is when you meet and you engage with the young people that we support, you see that
Yeah.
they're bright, you see that they're ambitious, you see that they're qualified, but
Yeah.
what it is that they lack is access to opportunity. And the
Yeah.
moment someone takes a chance on them or offers them that opportunity, that light bulb moment just goes off and
Yeah.
everything changes. And that's
Yeah.
why we've been able to be so successful in terms of placing young people in some of the best companies in the world, because some
Mm.
of those leaders took a chance to come along to one of our job fairs to engage with a group of our young people, and they saw the caliber of talent that was coming through the young people that we have in our program. So
Yeah.
that low expectation culture is something that we need to address. The overemphasis on deficits instead of potential is also another one as well. So we're really big on potential and what that looks like, what that could potentially grow into and
Yeah.
blossom into. But
Yeah.
because, we talk about underrepresented, Black, racially underrepresented, low income, there's always an ideology that kind of comes with that, that group of people could never amount to much. But you'd be surprised by just how much is there if given the opportunity for it to be expressed, you know?
Yeah. 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 No, I totally agree with you. Is there also something that we're missing in our worldview, in our culture? And I'm talking about here culture, not necessarily what individuals believe, but how the society is structured in
Hmm.
its fundamental beliefs, in its institutions, in its laws, in its customs, and so forth.
Hmm.
And essentially, every civilization has been that has happened through history has had a component of the numinous, a component of the more than, the greater than, the spiritual,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Except one, and that's the Western civilization or the Western culture that we
Yeah.
are currently experiencing and lived on and a part of. Do you? And I feel that what this does is it it makes it very mechanistic. It's like
Yes.
when you're dead, you're done. So where's the deeper meaning? Where's the real purpose? Where is there any reason why I shouldn't be making the most of my life and getting out there and doing it, and looking after myself and protecting myself and my family, and to boot with everybody else and so forth. Whereas if we reclaim that aspect within culture, within belief that there is more than,
Hmm.
yeah, however you call it, because different people have different labels they'll put on it, with
Hmm.
religious labels, Christian labels, and so forth. But how do you feel about this? Because I feel that the system that we're doing is wrong,
Yeah.
and there are a
Absolutely.
number of very interesting conversations you can have. But this one, where we are at now, is killing the kind of joy and life and opportunity that you're fighting so much against.
100%. I thought about this question and I've pondered on it. And what I've come to is that we've built systems without first building the people to fit within them. So what I'd say is that the biggest gap in society isn't skill. People talk about skill all the time. I would say it's self-awareness. People aren't fully aware of self. And
Yeah,
because you're not fully aware of self, before you start thinking of if there is a deeper meaning, if there's more to this, it needs to be that self-awareness in this first instance. So we
yeah,
focus too much on what we do and not
yeah,
enough on who we're being. It's a core part of the information that we share with our young people. Our program's called I Am Change for a reason. That I am is you helping you identify who you are, what
yeah,
makes you tick, what wakes
yeah,
you up in the morning, what gives you fulfillment.
yeah,
Once you're able to then start identifying all of those things, you then start thinking about life beyond yourself. It's not just about you. There has to be a bigger purpose. There has
yeah,
to be a reason why I'm here. And it's now
yeah,
your responsibility to figure out what that is. That's not going to be given to you in a textbook, or you're not going to find that on the internet. You can only find that from digging deep and looking within.
yeah,
Right. So that work needs to be done.
yeah,
When we're talking about identity, we don't just address identity. We create high performing individuals with low attainment and purpose. When you're doing things in this way, that's what you're seeing. But there is a different way of doing things, and that starts with that self-awareness piece, like I mentioned. So
yeah,
before we even start out on that journey, people have to be willing to take that pause, look deep within, figure out who they are, and then work from the outside, from the inside out. You talked about, we mentioned in our previous earlier on in this conversation about history. And sometimes I think about my life and I think, who would I be if I was born in a different age and in a different era?
mm,
How would I navigate life? We've
mm,
seen different iterations, different generations have come and gone, and they've all achieved different things. And I would always wonder, if I was born in those years while terrible things were happening to people that looked like me, how would I have
yeah,
responded? Would
yeah,
I still have this fight and this drive for social justice to do things differently? Or
yeah,
would I have just conformed? I don't
yeah,
know. But
yeah,
what I've then come to is that I am born into this age for a specific purpose. So I am here right now because I'm meant to be here right now. And I'm grateful for those that came before me because they've laid the foundation. And
yeah,
it would be a slap in the face of those that came before me for me to be here now and just be mediocre.
yeah,
Did you get where I'm coming from? So like for me, that even if we just look at that, forget the, greater purpose, higher being and all of that. Let's look back at history. Like look at
yeah,
how far we've come as a
yeah,
humanity, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
look at what's been done. Look at all the great achievements. And
yeah,
like what's going to be said of me, not just me, but my generation. Are we going
yeah,
to look back at this age and say, yeah, we did all that we could? We
yeah,
gave our all. or did we just complain about cost of living and bills all the time?
Yeah. Yeah. And just as how can we separate ourselves from each other, how can we separate ourselves from our ancestors? Because who are we without our ancestors? Who are our children without us? It's life which is kind of passing on one through another and so forth. Where do you draw the boundaries? There
This
are
is it.
plenty of philosophical and scientific arguments that show that whatever we place a label on is not an accurate description of what it is.
Mm,
Because as soon as we put a label on something, we define it as something that is separate, and nothing is separate. And
no.
science tells us that. There's a lovely, I don't know if I might have mentioned to you before, Dura, a gentleman called Bernardo Castrop, very interesting and inspiring man. And he has this lovely metaphor which he shares with people, which is it's as if in springtime with the apple blossom coming out. It's as if the apple blossom thinks it's all about it and starts to get very upset when it starts to get a little bit breezy and it begins to fade. It's like, oh my God, what's going to... No, it's not about the apple blossom.
It's
Yeah,
not about
it's
you.
about a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And I loved it a little earlier on when you said that your life was not about you.
Yeah.
And this is exactly where he leads with this metaphor.
Yeah.
And I just think so.
No, I think that's so powerful, and it's a conversation that we have in my household quite often when we're looking at politicians and political leaders and social leaders, social justice leaders of old who embarked on that journey from a selfless place. And I don't think we have that anymore, unfortunately. We don't have the inspirational leaders of old that led selflessly. I think we're seeing a lot now of leaders that are leading from a position of this is me, and I have the power and I want to be seen as this individual. It's not coming from a place of I am living a life of service.
No.
I'm taking up this office for service. They say it, they use
Yeah.
all of the right words and speak all of the right English, but their actions don't match the words that's coming out their mouth. And I think that's taken us into a very, very dangerous arena. And when
Yeah.
we're looking at the next generation coming up, they're looking at these leaders thinking, you don't inspire me. I don't
Yeah.
listen to you and I'm not filled with hope for the future.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go off and do my own thing.
I think, though, that there are a lot of leaders around who are kind of,
Absolutely.
yeah, they're
Absolutely.
not in the positions of power, which are
Yes.
really part of that, I must say, old structure. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there is a change happening. There is a fundamental change happening. It's undeniable.
Yes.
So the people who are leading that old structure are people of the old thinking.
Yeah. Old way of
And
thinking, old way of doing
but
things.
I notice it particularly since I've been doing metaconscious leaders. The people that I get to meet through this, there is extraordinary wisdom, leadership,
Mm.
vision that is just below the surface, and it's ready to come forward when it has the opportunity, and when people's consciousness shifts to the point where it goes,
And
hey,
they're
hang
ready
on a
for it.
second, there needs to be change, and it will be there. The
Yeah.
leaders are there, I believe.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why, the work that you're doing to kind of showcase and catalog these leaders is so important. And you might not see the benefits and the fruits of it now, but it will in the years to come where people are looking and seeking out these metaconscious leaders. They'll find the work that you're doing and essentially have a catalog of them, which will fill them with inspiration and know that they're not alone. And even the next generation of metaconscious leaders will also find your work and realize that find encouragement in that to enable them to kind of keep going. And yeah, it's a beautiful, chaotic time to be alive, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't have it any other way. I believe that through my life and my experiences and the journey that I've been on, things that I've seen, things that I've done, lessons that I've learned, it's equipped me with everything that I need to navigate these challenging times that are coming.
Yeah. You touched on something there, which is a neat little segue actually to where I was going to go next, Duro, which is a catalogue. I mean, whatever it may be, but those who follow.
Mm.
Yeah, the younger generation, and there is such an imbalance I sense between generations,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be in wealth distribution, ownership, like housing, opportunity, structurally, politically. When you think of the power of the grey vote, Yeah. People like me who are at the back end. And so we've got a lot of political parties who are pandering to old age pensioners and so forth, because it's basically a vote winner. The, what's it called? The Intergenerational Foundation.
Mm.
They came out with some statistic, which was in 2010, those under 40 held £7.53 of every £100 of wealth. All right. A decade later, so that would be a sort of 3 or 4 years ago, that had fallen to £3.98. So just a shade under £4. So as of now, people under the age of 40 own less than £4 of every £100 there is of wealth. Now, just as you don't need to be a meteorologist to know that it's raining, you don't need to be a sociologist or an economist to know that that's not sustainable. So there are some fundamental ways in which we have to look at governance, at ownership. I'm talking. What are your thoughts around this, Duro?
In terms of what needs to change, or how we need to start looking at these challenges?
Whether you agree with what I've just been saying there about distribution of power, wealth, ownership, governance, and how one can do something to change that.
I think we need to start having open and honest conversations around what that transfer of wealth looks like between generations, right? I think the older generation that have held the wealth for several years didn't do the work to prepare the next generation for what to do with that wealth. And for that reason, they're afraid to pass it on, because they fear it might just squander on.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So work needs to be done in and around that, and that's going to take time. We can't avoid the time that it's going to take. But then there's also the next generation who are starting to understand how to build wealth of their own, various different avenues of building wealth. So the stats that you just mentioned, yes, they're quite stark and they're staggering, and you start thinking, what's going on here? But given time, we're going to start to see that shift. And I can speak on this confidently because I'm bang in the middle of it. I'm seeing it happen day to day.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the projects that some of these young people are working on, and I can start to see the trajectory that they're on. And if they continue down that trajectory, where they'll get to in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, So sometimes there's data out there, but a lot of the data out there, I would say it's skewed because it doesn't factor in this next generation of young people that we're working with and that we're supporting, and for our organization, that's one of the avenues that we're looking to explore in our 2026 to 2028 strategy, is how can we start feeding into long-term research? How can we start highlighting some of the young people that we're working with so they can be on the radar of some of these research bodies, so they can then track them 10, 15 years time from now to see where they are, and then they can learn from the things that they learned in their formative years that made them different to their next counterpart, so to speak. Yeah. So there's work being done, but the long and short of it, there's still a lot more that needs to be done to ensure that this shift happens. Until we start having these open and honest conversations, nothing's going to happen. I see it time and time again. But the ones that are open to it, we're seeing that mindset shift is what's required for both the older and the younger generation.
And when the conversations start being had and we start to open up to what the issues are, then ideas will come forth as to how evolution can happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about doing arises from being. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So on that basis, what do we need to become? What qualities of consciousness are required for the next chapter of humanity's evolution?
That's a really good question. Really good question. I think we need to be a lot more open. And when I say open, I mean open to new ideas, open to new ways of doing things, open to difference. The more open we are to difference, the more we start to see things differently. It still kind of boils down to that mindset shift. It's a change of perspective. With limited information, you can't really change your perspective. If the information that you receive is the same, you're going to have the same outcomes. If you keep doing the same things, you're going to get the same outcomes. So in order for you to do different, you need new information. You need new and fresh information. And one of my qualities and one of the things that I enjoy doing the most is meeting new people from different backgrounds, different cultures, and different generations.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we sparked our friendship.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you know, whether it's someone that introduced us or I spotted you in the room. And when I go into new spaces, I tend to gravitate towards someone that is the total and the polar opposite of me. And I give myself the challenge of finding common ground with that individual. Is there something that we can gel on? Is there something that we can bond on? And then we can build from that. And because we're polar opposites, both in appearance, background, maybe even ideology, right? My next quest is, what can I learn from you and your background and from your experience? But then also, what can I share with you that you're going to leave that conversation thinking differently? You're going to leave that conversation thinking, I actually never thought about that before, or I never seen that from that perspective. So if we can all be a lot more open to difference, I think that will start to help us, climb on this mountain of evolution that we're so desperately seeking.
Yeah. I completely concur with that. I had something in my mind and it's just, it's just gone. Where was it? It was, that's right. I know. It was, you mentioned there about difference and looking for difference and then inquiring.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have common ground.
Yeah.
And if we can find that common ground, we then have the foundation from which to then build and learn.
Mm-hmm.
But very often we don't find the common ground, or we don't even appreciate that there is common ground. And actually, the common ground is kind of, either you can look at it as we are all humanity, or you can look at it as I am. We all have that essential understanding, knowing of being alive, being in existence. And never judge a book by its cover, because
Never.
the stories that sit behind the facade are unbelievably incredible and amazing. Oliver Sweet, who was talking about culture, one of my earlier guests,
Yes.
and he was talking about, because he embedded himself in a council estate, and he was following these guys around. Yeah, they knew that he was there, but he would follow them around. And he said he was got a little bit awkward because these guys were heavy guys, and they were intimidating, and they'd walk down the street and they'd be strutting and so forth. And he said, and then they'd hop up on a wall. And then they would walk along the wall and they'd jump onto a garage roof. And when they sat on the garage roof, nobody could see them. Nobody could see them. And they just dissolved into being a bunch of school kids, having fun, taking the mickey out of each other, just behaving like very normal, lovely people.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this whole thing of the book and the cover. Yeah. What you see is not what is really the case. And it's our ability to accept that there is something that's more profound and meaningful, and be able to hold the space for that to come out.
Absolutely. As you were talking, one thing came to mind on the earlier point that I made about leaning into that difference. And one of our key focus areas within 2020 is intergenerational working. That knowledge sharing from the older generation and also the younger generation sharing that knowledge back as well. And there's a line that came to mind as you were talking, and it's that the future is built when wisdom meets energy. So you have the wisdom of old and the energy of youth.
Beautiful.
When you bring that together, we can then create the future that we want to see. But we all have to lean into that difference. The older generation need to know that there is something that the younger generation brings. And the younger generation need to respect the knowledge of old. And be able to appreciate it. Not everything is better, faster with tech and with AI.
That's right. And they're there to be used as tools rather than own us.
Yeah.
They are valuable tools. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Trevor Waldock. He talks a lot about eldership.
No.
And so he's very much along these lines of, and this is a generational thing. And the flip side of that for me is youthship. It's like the inspiration and the kind of the coaching. Well, the coaching that I receive from my kids is quite notable now. They challenge me, and successfully so. Because their perception is very different to mine, and I welcome it.
Yeah.
It's so valuable.
But you know what? Not many people of your generation do. And I think that's partly where the challenge lies as well. And then if young people are being met with those that don't welcome that challenge, it gets their back up as well.
Yeah,
So we then go back into this whole notion of generalization. You know, the older generation are this way, the younger generation are this way, and then we're they're back working in silos, whereas we should be building these bridges
yeah,
between generations,
yeah,
knowledge sharing. Like this is the first ever time in history where we have 5 generations in the workforce. That's a beautiful thing
yeah, yeah.
if
Like,
approached in the right way.
yeah, yeah. That that actually holds the potentiality for immense innovation
Thank
if
you.
it can be
Honest.
harnessed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the companies that are going to benefit from that are the ones that choose to harness it in the right way. But they have to act now, right?
yeah,
Because if the older generation in the workforce aren't valued in the right way, they're just going to leave. You know, they'll
yeah,
take early retirement, those that can afford it, and they'll just leave and their knowledge will die with them. And,
yeah,
you know, you've got this new age business leaders that just want fast, efficient, you know, don't care how it's done, just need it done type of mentality. They'll
yeah,
lean into AI, lean into, you know, fast systems, fast processes without the
yeah,
knowledge base behind it.
yeah,
It's going to be, it'll be a phase, it will come and it will go. And
yeah,
then that's it, it's gone. And that knowledge will also go with it, right?
yeah,
So it's important that business leaders, team leaders really understand that there is value in having these multi generations within the workforce. And there's knowledge sharing that can happen at all levels. And
yeah,
new entry level talent shouldn't just be looked at as, you know, just fresh, unskilled, like they don't have anything to bring. They're just there to learn. I think
yeah,
you should welcome the younger generation, entry level talent to decision making tables and
yeah,
give them a voice, hear
yeah,
what they have to say, because you'll
yeah,
be surprised it's not always the loudest person in the room that
yeah.
has all of the right ideas. Sometimes it's the silent one. And the real leaders are the ones that recognize the voice of the most silent person in the room and welcomes them into that conversation.
Yeah, and as you say, if you bring in those 5 generations, the older ones and the younger ones, and they make the conversation and the outcome something that arises through all of the contributions, wow, you've got to end up with an outcome that's more robust, more resilient, more fruitful, haven't you?
100%.
Yeah, so we've kind of moved very nicely into business
Mhm.
and leadership in business. And because so much of what happens on the planet is actually business or is in some way affected by commercial influences, I see that we as business leaders and businesses we lead have a responsibility. Do you? And an opportunity. This is a responsibility, but it's also an opportunity
Yeah.
to have a great deal of positive impact, as well as have fun, as well as
Yeah.
be joyful, as well as make a contribution back to society. How do you see things?
I see it in the exact same way. I think business in the way it's always been done is not going to serve us in the future. Business
Yeah,
has to be business with a purpose. And I'm not saying every single business needs to become a social business, you know, but you can be a profitable business. You know, we live in a capitalist society. That's understandable. We need
yeah,
capitalism. But
yeah,
can capitalism be seen and be used as a force for good? And what do I mean by that? Can we have businesses that make huge amounts of profit, but they are mindful about how they spend that profit, where they channel that profit? Can pockets of that profit be used for social good? You know, can business leaders sit around the table and say a percentage of our profits will go to these particular causes that we care about. And even if it's a case where it's in line with how they make their money, that's even better because there are certain businesses that are damaging to society. And some of those business leaders don't care about the damage that they're causing to society or to the environment as long as their shareholders are happy. You know, can we start to shift that? And I believe we're going to see a shift because these shareholders will also change. You know,
yeah,
you got generations coming into the workforce that care about social value. A lot of
Yeah.
these young people won't go into companies that don't have a social conscience, that are not doing anything for society.
Yeah.
So it's not happening in droves now, but it will. And what my advice to business leaders has always been is don't wait until it's a problem before you start to fix it. You can start to fix it from now,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying completely overhaul your business model. You can do it in stages.
Yeah.
You can start from where you are. So we have fantastic organizations like B Corp that are doing something in line with that. And we're
Yeah.
seeing
True.
more and more uptake in B Corp. I think it started in the US. It's now taken over in the UK. I think there are more UK B Corps or European B Corps than there are US B Corps. That's just
Yeah.
showing you the avenue, the direction of travel when it comes
Yeah.
to these things. And
Yeah.
that's coming from top down. And I'm trying to help these business leaders see from the bottom up. These young people going into the workforces are not going to work for companies that solely just care about profit.
Yeah.
That's changing.
Yeah.
And business leaders need to change and need to adopt to those changes as well. So I think we're going to see a change. It's already happening. And
Yeah.
I think that change is going to continue to grow. And the ones that will benefit from it will be the ones that join the wave from early, not when the wave is up here.
Yeah.
You join it as it's building. And I'm going to keep preaching this gospel until everybody listens.
Yeah, because Duro, you also, as well as your work with 2020 Level, you also are an executive coach for
Mm.
250 companies, aren't you? And
Yeah, no, not 250 companies. I'd have no time.
sorry, FTSE 250 companies, correct? So, what qualities do you? How do I put this without in the right way? What qualities of leadership are missing in today's corporate world?
How long do we have?
Your
I'll
call.
start with that selfless leadership, that leading with empathy. I think
Yeah.
I've seen a shift, right? Pre-COVID and post-COVID,
Yeah.
right? I've seen a lot more FTSE 250 leaders now start to lean into leading with empathy and really kind of understanding what that means.
Yeah.
But it's not a switch. You can't just flip it on and flip it off, right? You can't just say, I was like this pre-COVID and I'm now like this post-COVID. And that's the beauty of my work, right? Taking them
Yeah.
along on that journey, being a sounding board, being that individual where they can share things with, and I can sound it out for them and say that doesn't really land well. Like, where is that really coming from? What is it that you're trying to communicate here? And is there a different way of saying this to ensure that it lands well to the
Yeah.
audience that you're communicating with? So it's that empathetic leadership. That for me is what I see as a superpower that's starting to emerge with a lot of these leaders. And there are certain leaders that are just not going to cut it because they've been the way that they've been for so long. And I think
Yeah.
they're going to have a rude awakening when they realize that their leadership style is no longer producing the results that they expect it to, and that
Yeah.
it had been producing up until this point.
Yeah.
So something has to change, whether that's something within them or whether that's them themselves. And part of the success in this level of advisory to these leaders is maybe you're no longer the right person to lead this organization to where it needs to get to. And that, as you can imagine, go on.
I mean, something that comes to mind is that I do quite a bit of work with emotional intelligence, working with leaders, and empathy is one of the 10 qualities of emotional intelligence that we lean into. A high proportion of CEOs have low empathy. Now,
Yeah.
the really interesting thing about this is, though, that doesn't mean that they are not
Not empathy.
empathic human beings. It's just that they don't see the role of that or the approach within a working environment. And when they're invited to, well, give it a try, and one breaks it down into the smaller components and so forth, when they then start to engage empathy within the workplace, within their leadership style, things start to change. And it's quite dramatic how that recognition of empathy as being a leadership quality that mightn't have been appropriate or considered appropriate 20, 30, 40, whenever it was back then, is now appropriate. And indeed, if you don't have it, it's a burden. How can organizations and leaders, what can they learn from the work that you're doing with 2020 level? And how can they better engage with and support the next generation beneficially for all parties, for themselves, for the companies, as well as for the individuals there as well?
Yeah, no, it's a win-win for everyone. We have over 4,500 alumni members aged between 18 to 30 in our current programs. And then that age range can also go up to 40 as well. So this is the next wave of leaders coming into the workforce. Companies can lean into that, tap into the knowledge, tap into the insight that they have to help drive their organizations forward. A lot of these companies, this is their target demographic that they're looking to either buy their products or their services, right?
Yeah.
So instead of you paying big marketing agencies to understand what these young people think, why don't you just ask them directly what they think? So that's a number of different ways. But for us, we're in the business of showcasing talent and
Right.
helping you discover talent in the most unconventional arenas, places where you wouldn't think talent existed, where we exist to debunk a lot of those myths and showcase talent from environments that you wouldn't even think good things can come out of, but we have them in droves. So we're changing all of that. And we do it in a way where it's easy to engage, easy to tap in. It starts with a simple conversation to really understand what these companies need. And a lot of them do need talent. So we can provide them with that. We have mentoring opportunities. We have opportunities where people can showcase insights into their business, into their industry, and what it is that they do. And then we can help place the talent in that business as well. So we don't just stop by placing the talent. We work with the employers to ensure that the environment is safe and conducive for the growth and the development of that individual. So what you're doing is you're starting at entry level, and then that young person is rising up through the ranks over the years, hopefully to the point where they can get into C-suite and start helping change the culture of what that company is and helping it become a lot more diverse and inclusive as a result of it as well. So that's essentially what we do. And people can find out more about us. We're on every major social media platform, 2020 levels, and our website as well, www.
Brilliant. And so companies can get in touch with you and you can help them achieve higher levels of a higher quality and greater diversity of recruitment.
Absolutely.
Within their business.
And there's also the consultation element as well. So if they need insights provided for them from Gen Z in particular, particularly Gen Z from diverse backgrounds, we can also help and support with that as well.
Brilliant. Duro, this has been, I will put, by the way, the links that you've just described, they'll be in the show notes below.
Amazing.
And thank you very much for that. Duro, this has been an extraordinary conversation. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your time, your wisdom, your insights. And thank you also for the invaluable work, you do in our society.
Thank you, Greg. Means
I
a lot.
salute you. I salute you.
I salute you right back, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I know you're pushed for time. I hope we can do this again sometime. Thank you again a million times, Duro, and go well. God bless. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
How inspiring was that? Duro is undoubtedly one of the new generation of leaders whose activities are impacting in a very real manner the ways in which society operates so that we can collectively embrace to a greater degree the talent and diversity that is in our midst. To find out more about Duro, please find the links in the show notes below. And I do hope that those who can are able to connect with him and benefit from the invaluable work that he's doing. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, as this greatly encourages the algorithms to spread our conversations to a wider audience. And please also leave a comment and share what you're thinking. We love hearing from you as well. This is Metaconscious Leaders with me, Greg Seward. Until next week, be present, be well.